Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here on a Saturday evening or this early evening, late afternoon, right? I'd like to introduce to you first the committee members of Michael Vigil's thesis, and that is Dr. Walter. Myself, Dr. Colfax is representing the Research and Graduate Studies Office, and Dr. Brayman is off island. So we are recording.
Yes.
We're going to be recording the defense, and we're going to send it to him so he can review and give us input. This is Michael Vigil, and his research is a study of mindfulness meditation and practice on Micronesian Islands undergraduate students. So Michael's going to be presenting all his study from beginning to end in abbreviated fashion, and if you need papers to jot down your questions, I'd be happy to give them to you. I like to ask you to pull off your questions until he's done with his presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Artaro, for the introduction. Ladies, gentlemen, committee members, and Dr. Colfax, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule on this Easter weekend to come to my thesis defense. The study is a mindfulness meditation in Pacific and Micronesian Island undergraduate students. And that's the title of the study. What prompted the research study? Through the course of my counseling education, a culmination of it is the practicum and also the internship. One of my internship sites was Pacific Island University, and while counseling the Micronesian and Pacific Islander students there, I noticed some recurring themes that they would bring into the counseling process. One, of course, would be, I have issues dealing with certain type of emotions. How do I express these emotions in a healthy manner? Another one was, they have their beliefs from their island, but being that PIU is a Christian school, there was a clash there. So do I stay true to what my island culture tells me about spirituality and religion, or do I switch to what's being taught to me at this Christian university? Another issue that was brought up was, I'm so preoccupied with things that are happening. I'm worried about my finances. They were worried about things that happened in the past and things that are going to happen in the future. These were the recurring themes that I thought, and I said, well, these are only a few of the students that I'm seeing for counseling. What about the rest of the population at Pacific Island University? I'm sure they're experiencing the same kind of issues and concerns. So I said, what would be a practical way to help these students cope with these type of stresses and issues? Well, I did some research, and it turns out that mindfulness meditation can generate changes in mindfulness awareness, emotional intelligence, and spiritual experience. Mindfulness meditation has long been valued as a contributor to both psychological and spiritual strength. It has been described as a non-judgmental awareness of both internal and external experience, moment to moment. An open, undivided observation is what occurring both internally and externally, rather than a particular cognitive approach to external stimuli. So mindfulness meditation, being in the present moment. For example, say you're washing the dishes. A lot of the time it's on autopilot. You're not paying attention, just wash, wash, wash. Mindfulness meditation, what that does is you pay attention to all the senses while you're doing it. What is the temperature of the water? What is the smell of the soap? These type of things, taking into the experience and being in the present moment of the task at hand. And we come to mindfulness. What is mindfulness? It is a way of paying attention to the present moments on purpose and without judgment. And the definition of emotional intelligence is the ability of an individual to understand his own and others' emotions and feelings, to distinguish between them, and to use this knowledge in his decision-making process and actions. And of course, this is important in our program, the counseling program, because empathy is one of those things that we're taught to recognize in the counseling process. And finally, spiritual experience is the extent to which inner experiences and personal spiritual experience might constitute an integral part of the ordinary individual. There were 4 test instruments that we used. 3 were self-report measures. The first one was the Mindful Attention Awareness Scale, or the MAAS. It is a 15-item self-report measure instrument designed to assess a core characteristic of mindfulness, namely a receptive state of mind in which attention is informed by a sensitive awareness of what is occurring in the present. This is in contrast to the conceptual vehicle of processing, in which events and experiences are filtered through cognitive appraisals. It uses a 6-point Likert type scale, but for consistency in the data analysis and also for simplification of the data, we modified it to a 5-point Likert type scale. The next test instrument that was used was the Emotional Intelligence Scale, or the EIS. It's a 33-item self-report measure instrument developed by Nicolette Schuett that measures the cooperative combination of intelligence and emotion. It consists of self-referencing statements and requires subjects to rate the extent to which they agree or disagree with each statement. And this was a 5-point Likert type scale as well. And finally, we have the Daily Spiritual Experience Scale. There's 16 items. The first 15 items are measured using the modified 6-point Likert type scale. Again, we modified this self-report measure to 5-point for simplification of the data analysis. And also, the last question was omitted, so we kept it to 15 items. The items attempt to measure experience rather than particular beliefs or behavior. Thus, the DSES is intended to measure beyond the boundaries of an individual's particular religion. The intention of this instrument was to determine the extent to which inner experiences and personal spiritual experiences might constitute an integral part of the ordinary individual. And finally, the Mindfulness Journal. Because this was a mixed study of both quantitative and qualitative data, the first 3 test instruments were quantitative. The last one, which is the Mindfulness Journal, was the qualitative. And the Mindfulness Journal is an instrument that reflected common themes or signs that could be used as a ruler that measured growth across themes or signs. The first 10 questions are the quantitative research questions. For questions 1 through 3, we wanted to see if there was a correlation between all 3 test instruments. For numbers 4 through 6, we wanted to see if there was a difference between the pre-test and the post-test scores, to see if the intervention of the mindfulness journals had any significant changes on these instruments. For numbers 7 through 8, we tested between the male and the female. And then number 9, well, this is separate. This is male and female post-test scores. Number 9 is male between female pre-test and post-test scores. Number 10, we did the chi-square test, and that was to determine if there was a change in the 5 possible answers between the 3 test instruments. And finally, the qualitative research questions in regards to the mindfulness journals were: what changes in emotional awareness can be identified in practicing mindfulness meditation? What representational systems or what senses can be recognized and brought to conscious awareness while practicing mindfulness meditation? And finally, what changes in perceptions and attitude can be identified while practicing mindfulness meditation? And now we move on to the review of literature. Mindfulness and the therapeutic process. Again, to reiterate what I said, the concept of being aware in the present moment is described and practiced in many different cultures and religions. A basic description of mindfulness is a moment-to-moment awareness of present experience with acceptance. A lot of the therapeutic theories nowadays are implementing mindfulness into their practice. It seems to be the hot topic of the day. Experiential models support the notion that therapists must have an attuned awareness to recognize client markers and make process directives to facilitate clients in resolving difficult issues. Dialectical behavior theory and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy recognize the therapist's present awareness and ability to cultivate passionate attention, the salient foundation of the therapeutic relationship. And surprisingly, psychoanalysis, where usually the counselor himself would be disconnected from the client, they started to change their approach. We talk about meta-communication or mindfulness in action. This interpersonal approach focuses on the mutual emotional environment of the client and therapist, in addition to the therapist's ability to regulate their own emotions when engaging in certain therapeutic techniques or difficult moments. So that was surprising because now psychoanalysts are being included in the journey. It's a mutual journey between the therapist and the client. Spirituality, religion, and the relation to island culture. Religion and spirituality Many people believe they're analogous in nature, but there is a distinct difference. So religion is seen as relating to beliefs, doctrines, and practices associated with membership in a religious institution, whereas spirituality is based on direct experiences of non-ordinary aspects and dimensions of reality. It does not require a special place or a leader to mediate contact with the divine. Now, while they are different, they also complement each other. Spirituality is an innate characteristic of the human psyche, and religion gives spirituality direction. Catholicism and Christianity are the dominant religions in many of the Pacific and Micronesian islands. This is due to the expansion of conquering civilizations. Of course, when the Spanish came, Catholicism became the dominant religion. However, despite the many foreign invasions and influences, traditions, rituals, and beliefs of the island cultures remain steadfast. Some examples. In Chuk, it is not uncommon for families of a deceased family member to see that person. Also in Yap, they use magic. If a man desired a woman, he would ask for somebody who performed magic to put the spell on the woman so the man can get her. They're also used for if they wanted some auspicious weather. If somebody wanted some rain, they would go to somebody who practiced magic, and they would do some sort of spell to bring the rain. Cultural beliefs concerning spirituality and ritual, while remaining strong to the cultural roots, have given way to a synthesis of beliefs. This is called syncretism, when you have two separate beliefs that are mixed together, and in this way it's for a culture to remain its identity but also evolve. Stress, college students, and emotional intelligence. This is something all college students can relate to. Life is full of stress for college students. Recent reports show that college students' stresses have increased in severity in past years. For college students, the ability to manage perceived stress while remaining diligent in academic studies can pose a challenge. This is even more apparent for those students who are coming from outer islands who have to make the transition into the westernized style of living. In addition to being away from home, they can face feelings of isolation, of course financial issues, and if you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, that can cause stress in your life too. There are effective and ineffective ways of coping with stress. When an individual is dealing with a stressful situation, identification and expression of emotion results in more effective coping. Some of the leading ways that college students do deal with stress that are not effective ways: watching TV, surfing the internet, Facebook. While those take your mind away from the stress, at the same time you're not dealing with the stress. Once you're done with that activity, the stress still comes back. In this way, it can also form maladaptive behaviors, which can, after the college experience, follow you later on in life. So it's more effective to deal with stress with expression. Emotional intelligence involves accurately recognizing and expressing one's own emotions, regulating one's emotions, using emotions to make good decisions and to motivate oneself, and understanding others' emotions. Jung, archetypes and culture. Carl Gustav Jung came up with the concept of archetypes. They are universal forms of apprehension that appear as primordial images pregnant with meaning and power. Images that impart a pertinent influence upon a group's collective pattern of behavior. The thing with Jung is a lot of his literature is misunderstood. When he says images, it's not so much a picture of something. Images means patterns or dispositions of a group of people. And this is important for culture. These images play a pivotal role in assisting an individual to recognize one's place in society. Jungians state that the human psyche cannot function without a culture, and no individual can experience a full, healthy development without society. And living in groups is a necessity, and that is a prerequisite for the emergence of psychic energy or libido. A lot of the times libido gets misunderstood too. We think of libido as sexual energy. No, it's any type of psychic energy. If the libido has no external direction, such as culture or religion, it inverts inward, and this can cause damage to an individual psyche or a collective group psyche as well. Now we move on to the methodology. Of course, first, before delving into the research study, we had to obtain approval from the Committee of Human Research Subjects. An application was filed with them, and upon approval, I acquired verbal approval from the Pacific Islands University board. After this was done, I conducted a pilot study. I just wanted to make sure if the test instruments were understood. The total amount of time for the pilot study took about 25 minutes. After this was done, I got in contact with the student life at Pacific Island University, and we put up announcements and emails were sent out to garner the most participants. January 14th was considered the best date, and that was when we had our meeting. All participants were given written informed consent, one for the researcher and one for their own records. In addition, each participant was given a copy describing the purpose of the study. I also explained confidentiality, that anything that is shown in the data results, their identity would be completely confidential. Upon acquiring all of the informed consent, a general information document was distributed, and this was to gather general demographics. Next, the 3 self-report measures in the study were administered in this order: the Mindfulness Attention Awareness Scale, the Emotional Intelligence Scale, and the Daily Spiritual Experience Scale. And how we did this is, we would administer one test instrument, we would wait until everybody was finished, then we would do the next, and then we would do the next. Once the last one was done, the DSES, a random number generator was used and half of the participants were dismissed. The remaining individuals were then given mindfulness journals. And because this was a new concept to a lot of the participants, I explained to them in depth what mindfulness was. In addition to each of the mindfulness journals that I gave them, which was a composition notebook, there was an insert in each one of these that, again, explained what mindfulness meditation was, and it told them the instructions that they were to do during the course of the study. And these instructions were that for the next 4 weeks, for 2 days out of each week, Monday through Friday, no weekends, they would choose a day of mindfulness. And that whole day they would practice mindfulness, and they would record what they experienced during that day. On Friday, there would be a box at the front of the office. I would go and collect all these journals. If they didn't turn in the journal, I would track them down and get the journal from them, which happened quite often. Then on Monday, I would return all the journals back to them after I had made responses over the weekend. And then at the end of the 4-week study on February 17th, at the PIU campus, all 3 self-report measures were re-administered and the mindfulness journals were collected. Participants were notified that the results of the study would be available to them upon request. Also, in the first meeting, I forgot to mention that I told them that anytime during the study, if they wanted to withdraw, they could. And also, that if any of them had issues with psychological harm, that they would be directed to the UOG counseling office. We have this graph, the age and gender profile. The ages ranged from 18 to 32 years old. We had 12 males participate and 10 females, a total of 22. While this number may not seem ideal for a research study, because usually 30 is the minimum number, as you can see, the total population of PIU is 85. We had 22. If you put that in percentages, it's a little over 25%. So that makes it pretty valid and reliable. Altogether, there are 44 males that attend and 41 females. And out of this, we got 27% of the male population and 24% of the female population. We had a very diverse range of ethnicities that participated in this study, which I was very happy about. We had 10 Chuukese, 4 Pohnpeian, 3 Yapese, 3 Caucasian, and 1 Caucasian and 1 Palauan. And this is the Mindfulness Attention Awareness Scale. This is the modified version. So it's a 1 through 5 Likert point type scale. And this is the second page. This is the Emotional Intelligence Scale. This one was not modified because it was already a 5-point Likert type scale. And finally, this is the Daily Spiritual Experience Scale. And this was modified to 5-point Likert type scale again. And now we move on to the exciting part, the quantitative results. Between the mindfulness, attention, and spiritual experience test measures, there was not a significant correlation. Between the post-test scores of the mindfulness attention scale, there was not a significant correlation. However, between the pretest, there was. It had a negative correlation. And we'll get to that in the results section. Also, between this daily spiritual experience scale and the emotional intelligence scale, there was again a negative correlation between the two test measures. And we used Pearson's correlation test to determine this. For questions 4 through 6, there was no significant difference between the post-test score, the pre-test and the post-test scores of any of the 3 test instruments. Okay, for questions 7 and 8, there was not a significant difference between any of the 3 test instruments and male and female pre-test and post-test scores. Between male and female pre-test and post-test scores, there was no significant difference between any of the 3 survey instruments. But we get to question 10, and there was a statistically significant difference in the responses between the pre-test and post-test scores within 2 of the 5 responses. And we will get to that in the results section as well. We did have statistically significant differences between the mindfulness attention awareness scale and also between the daily spiritual experience scale. There was no significant difference between the emotional intelligence score responses. And we used the chi-square test to determine this. As you can see, pretty significant difference, 37 to 14 between almost always, and then to somewhat frequently, 83 to 106. And then also for the daily spiritual experience scales, you can see many times a day, 116 to 92, and then every day, 95 to 120. So there was significant changes in the responses of these test instruments. And now we come to the results section. Oh no, sorry. This is the qualitative results of the study. So the first 10 questions were quantitative, the next 3 are qualitative. The researcher found that all participants involved in this aspect of the study indicated that practicing mindfulness meditation brought to their awareness a variety of feelings, both negative and positive. And for this analysis of the data, we used IPA, the interpretive phenomenological analysis. And what this does is this determines signs or themes in the journal across all the journals. We weren't looking for individual responses in the journal. We tried to look for things that occurred through all of the journals. We also found that all participants in the study indicated an awareness of the different representational systems or senses while practicing mindfulness meditation. And also the final theme is we found that all participants in the study indicated that their experience of practicing mindfulness meditation brought to awareness differences or changes in perception. And I was very excited about that one, and we'll get to that. And now the discussion. Again, there was no significance between the mindfulness attention and spiritual experience scale. This suggests that there was not a meaningful relationship between these 2 test instruments. In regards to question 2, there is not a statistically significant correlation between the mindfulness attention and emotional intelligence post-test scores, but as I said earlier, in the pre-test scores, there was some evidence for an inferable negative correlation between mindfulness attention and emotional intelligence. It can be concluded that as a participant's emotional intelligence increases, their mindfulness attention decreases. What this may suggest is that emotional aspects of experience take precedence over mindfulness attention. This is exciting for us in the counseling field because we talk about affect a lot. In regards to question 3, the data showed a significant negative correlation between spiritual experience and emotional intelligence again. It can be concluded that as a participant's daily spiritual experience decreases, emotional intelligence increases. So in both of these correlation between these test instruments, emotional intelligence always seems to increase. What this data may suggest is that again, emotional intelligence takes precedence when juxtaposed with spiritual experience and mindfulness attention. Significant emotional experience seems to be the most pertinent aspect of an individual's experience. And of course, I said earlier, the counseling process attempts to make sense of emotion and feeling, and affect is paramount to effective counseling. In regards to questions 4 through 6, the data showed no significant difference in the pre-test and post-test scores between any of the 3 survey instruments. It can be concluded that the quantitative treatment of the data was probably not the most appropriate method of capturing measurable changes with the intervention of the mindfulness journals. For questions 7 through 8, again, there was no statistically significant difference in the male or female pre-test and post-test scores between the 3 test instruments. And for question 9, between male and female pre-test and post-test scores, again, there was no significant difference in any of the 3 survey instruments. In regards to question 10, there was a difference in the pre-test and post-test scores within 2 of the 5 responses in the mindfulness attention survey instrument. This shift in proportionality indicated that there's evidence that the intervention administered between the pre-test and post-test had the effect of shifting participant responses away from almost always to somewhat frequently. It may be concluded that there was some change in responses within the mindfulness attention survey because of the mindfulness journals. So taking question 1 from the mindfulness attention awareness scale, I could be experiencing some emotion and not be conscious of it until sometime later. This was almost always. So almost always they were not conscious that they were feeling something. This shifted to somewhat frequently. I would say that's very significant. So now somewhat frequently I could be experiencing some emotion and not be conscious of it until sometime later. And for question 3, I find it difficult to stay focused on what's happening in the present. Almost always I find it difficult. Now it's shifted to somewhat frequently. I find it difficult. So a significant change there. And again, there was also a difference in the pre-test and post-test scores within each of the 5 responses for the spiritual experience scale. Again, this shift in proportionality shifted away from many times a day to every day. So it may be concluded in this aspect too that the mindfulness journal used as an intervention conducted between the 2 surveys had some change in this test instrument. And there was no difference in the pre-test and post-test scores for the emotional intelligence scale. Now moving on to the qualitative data, which I found very exciting. Regarding questions 11, the qualitative analysis suggests that participants became more aware of their positive and negative emotional states. Now these 2 excerpts are word for word from journals. So this participant expressed, I started to reflect on what happened last night, and I started to ask myself why I got mad, and I realized I had a very bad emotional conversation with one of my friend, that I tried to hide the emotions I had, but it was all mixed up. I was mad, heartbroken, and I started to regret things. Awareness of why they were feeling a certain way. Another participant expressed, singing really helps me feel better, smile deep inside. Both negative and positive. These were reoccurring themes in the mindfulness journals. Regarding question 12, participants became more aware of their different representational systems or their senses being utilized and brought to consciousness. Another excerpt from a journal. I noticed later on today that when I see things or heard things, that reminds me of things in the past or things that I think would be in the future. I would start to wonder of imagining or picturing myself back into those times. Here we have a simultaneous use of different representational systems, vision and auditory, bringing that to consciousness. Another excerpt, washed my hands with water so cold. The grass was a little soaked, probably by the cold because it didn't rain. Again, simultaneous use of representational systems. Kinesthetics or touch, you noticed that the water was cold. Vision, you saw that the grass was soaked a little bit. And finally, this was the gem for me, was that participants experienced changes in perception and attitude while practicing mindfulness meditation. I noticed that every morning I always followed a routine. I would wake, go to the kitchen, look out the window, check the time, came back, then get ready to go shower. And even when I'm in the bedroom, I always turned on the water first, then wash my face, then brush my teeth. And before I get to the shower, I would always sit on the toilet even if I'm not using it. Right there I realized that I've been doing it every morning. I usually don't care how long I let the water run, but today I was aware that I was wasting water at the moment. I really enjoyed this because they're becoming conscious of things that they're doing, their routines, but it also was a motivation for them to change. She had the same routine every day. She didn't think much of it until she started paying attention to the present moment awareness of it. She realized that she was wasting water. Regenerative change. The next journal entry. Still hard to keep in mind the present, but when I do, I observe more what is going on around me and what is being said. Everything makes a little more sense. Again, paying attention to the present moment can make more sense of things. And finally, recommendations. The mixed methods approach of quantitative and qualitative methods. While they are both good for future research studies, what we have determined is that data analysis of mindfulness meditation will probably be best through qualitative research methods. And the reason why we say this is because the quantitative research instruments that we used only capture one aspect of experience, whereas the qualitative method of using the mindfulness journals captures the subjective experience of everything that the person is experiencing in time. That's why the mindfulness journaling was so effective. And for the test instruments, I believe that, or to my knowledge, this is the only type of study that has been done in this region of the world. These test instruments that we used, the mindfulness attention awareness scale, the emotional intelligence scale, and also the daily spiritual experience scale, they have been used, but mostly in the mainland. What might be done for future research is perhaps develop a test instrument that is specific to this region. And also, if you are going to do a mixed study, perhaps only use the mindfulness journaling and the mindfulness attention awareness scale, because there seems to be a correlation between the intervention of the mindfulness journals and their changes in responses on the mindfulness attention awareness scale. What does this mean for colleges and universities? Well, the focus of colleges and universities is first academic development and achievement of their students. However, mindfulness journaling could be effective for some students, especially ones who are just coming to the college environment, to help them deal with stress, to help them figure out effective ways of coping with these stresses. Could probably implement that into a freshman composition course or even have a workshop for it. And this concludes my research study of mindfulness meditation. Again, I thank you everybody for taking time out of your busy schedule to come to this thesis defense. Questions?
Go ahead, I like to.
Well, thank you, Michael, for a very interesting topic. I find a lot of themes and threads that are of great interest to me personally. My dissertation was on stress.
Oh,
I'm a certified EQ trainer as well. So Dr. Walter and our colleague John Rivera is also an EQ certified trainer. So this is an area that's very interesting, emotional intelligence. So I'm very interested in this. And I obviously with a business perspective rather than a counseling perspective. So we're looking at things like that. Very well presented, very thorough. I think that you did a really good job of taking this information and pulling these tools together and using them to get some what seem to be quite impressive results. I think that they can have a very good impact on possibly make some nice recommendations for counseling and counselors in the future, particularly counselors who are dealing with young people who are coming out of other cultures into a different culture and who may or may not have issues adapting and focusing, but particularly in the learning situations. think that's good. I like your point there at the end about maybe including this in courses. I was wondering whether this could even be helpful with, and this isn't really a question, it's more like a discussion topic that you may want to think about, and maybe make this as a recommendation, that this be incorporated in high school counseling for seniors who are looking to go to college. Because this would be, if they could start the journaling early, then as they came to college, whether it's here on Guam or elsewhere, they would have this practice as part of their lives. And so they would feel more comfortable sharing their ideas. I don't know what your thoughts might be on
That would be a very good idea, because the transition from high school to college life can be very daunting for a lot of people. So using a mindfulness journal to record their experiences and what they're going through, what type of emotions they're going through, I think you're right, it could be helpful for them.
Might be something. Yes. And tying in with that, you know, I tried journaling. And I do it occasionally, but I would imagine that journaling is probably an issue for some people that to do it on a regular basis, whereas as instead of a written journal, could they talk their journals because most of us have tools now that we can use to record ourselves, and if I know, and I can set it up so that it'll remind me, it'll blink or blink at me, and it'll say, hey, time to record your thoughts for the next 15 or 20 minutes, and it would be better than the journals and having to chase them down.
I like that idea.
That might be something for future students if they're looking at a journaling aspect, whether it's in counseling or elsewhere, might be a tool that they could use.
I like that idea. Because that was the issue, is trying to track people down to get the journals. But integrating technology into the study, I think that would be even better than having something that's written.
I'll defer to my colleagues and to the audience before I get you with all the other stuff. Okay.
Yeah,
A lot of questions, but they don't need to go all but very nice.
You know, let me just say, Michael, really, I'm so pleased with you. The way I observe my students, I do not spend much time in reading their works. That's really helping me part of the makeup. But what I do, I observe them when they present it. And that's the way I do an interview. You show it to me that you're nervous, I'll give you an F. Yeah, but really, I'm so proud of you. You know your stuff. And there shouldn't be any reason why would you be nervous when you know it. And that's why I was looking at you. And you did very good. Really so proud of you. You were comfortable, you were confident. Your confidence level is very, very good. And I want to really commend you because you did a lot of work with him. Yeah, my area, I'm not an expert like Dr. Colfax in this area. But the reason why I was interested in joining the community because you're dealing with micronesia students. And I'm really pleased that you're taking that effort to contribute to the literature. Because it's very weak in that area. And it's good that you're one of those that you're writing. And I can even use your thesis as a source of reference. And that's why I want to thank you for that, really for doing it. And the other thing I like it also when you mentioned the instruments should be, in the future, should be culturally specific. It could be, like for instance, I don't believe in numbers sometimes. Somebody can get a 90%. But then, when they perform it, it's a totally different story. when they're doing it in the classroom or teaching, and it's just wonder, you get an A? And then, my gosh, you cannot even speak.
And vice versa too.
Yeah. And so great. I want to thank you, and Dr. Radero, you did a very, very good job in doing this. And just before you came in, I and Dr. Kovacs were talking. Elaborate more, on the invitation of the study. That's a fact. It's a convenience symbol. We have more than 10,000 people from the FAS here in Guam. And you're not only talking about 22 of them. Yeah. So, it's good to sit with the community, scientific community. I did this, but I think again, really the bottom line, it's good that we are learning from these people. It's about their perspectives.
Exactly.
It's not yours, it's not mine. But it's their perspective that we're learning from. And that's really what I like that. And it's good that I emphasize it. But overall, congratulations. And maybe your girlfriend is doing a very good job. Right?
She was very helpful. All positive.
Be proud of yourself, and good daddy, and you did very good. So proud of you. Thank you. And thank you very much, Dr. Kovacs, for coming in and joining us. And again, my special compliment to you.
I know you did not use the word magic in your thesis, and since this is part of my field, the observation, right, or perception, and I believe that did not land very well on looking at our Pacific peoples doing magic. Because in the Western culture, we think of magic as hocus pocus, rather than, we know we go to the Suruhana and Suruhana, and I don't know what is the term or the for healers and people who
Spiritual heroes, I think.
yeah,
I think that we got spiritual leaders. I don't like to use the word magic.
yeah, it just has
Yeah. It works. And I believe it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I've seen
well,
it.
we don't believe it's magic, we believe it.
Yeah.
It's
I
an
want
alternative healing or alternative communication.
Okay. Well, I did quote it in my thesis. I got that from a citation in one of my references. They did mention magic, but it is a very old reference.
And it may be an insult to our island people, and of course it includes me. So, because yes, we truly believe in, even though we may belong to an organized religion, we still believe in our own spirituality.
Well, my intention was not to offend anybody. That's what I did. And
Well,
I apologize.
that's why I bring that up, and I appreciate the spontaneous reaction, because that's part of what we need to address.
Okay.
And I wondered, I would like to see a section in your discussion on more on Pacific culture or Pacific, Pacific groups.
Don't sit there on
Pacific groups, okay, since you did, and review again your literature section to see that there is a particular section that talks about, I like to have included a description of the, where the islands are, the sizes, as you said, there's a lot. 22 is just a drop in the bucket. It's a good representation from PLU, but it just shows your reader how huge the population is. And also I think you did write about, yes, you talk about coming from a culture, an island culture, into Guam is still an island culture, but there's a big difference. And for some of the atolls, I say that wrong, atolls, they have to ride a boat or to get into the main island, and so there's a big difference in transportation.
In fact, with a lot of the studies that we do with this part of the world, it is always helpful to put a map. Put a small map that shows where Guam is, where Hawaii is, because they're really related to Hawaii, or Japan, or the Philippines, but then where are the other islands? And the fact that that PIU alone and UOG and many of these institutions and organizations are serving an area that actually is as large as the United States. We cover the whole United States. I mean, if you place, the Marshalls on New York City or out in Boston, Palau is on the West Coast. I mean, that's literally, if you can actually lay the map out with the U.S. on there, and it'll show it. And a lot of people who could read this, thesis, won't have an understanding of how far your Palauans have traveled, or your Pontayans, or your other culture, the Chuquiso, etc. And so, and tying off of what Dr. Artero is talking about, in your introduction of the cultures, you may want to even reference who they were colonists of. Who were they? Because in Pohnpei, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Germans.
Spanish, Germans, Japanese.
Right, and so those influences are going to be very different, have very different perspectives, I believe. Okay. At least it would help us to understand, people to understand. You're not talking about everybody is Micronesian, they're all the same. After all, we know they all are, right? Not. I know that very, very well. So that's, really, when you're